Hello guys, good day. Welcome to our first discussion on the first module on the subject personal identification techniques, no? So today we're just going to cover the introductory part of this subject matter, no? I do believe you're well aware already on the content, no, or the context of the subject matter, no? So, for this module, on module 1, we're going to be talking about the following. No, meron tayo guys dito. Personal identification method through ages. No, let's just try to revisit some part of the early methods, no, adopted by our ancestors in establishing the identity of one person. So we have there tattooing, scarification, portrait parley, photography, and anthropometry as the most common one. Before we can jump into fingerprinting. Then after that, we're going to be talking also about the history of fingerprint. So we are going to talk about the contributors and significant events that pave the way for the establishment of fingerprint as a reliable means of establishing the identity in comparison to what we have before, like for example tattooing and other subject matter. Okay, so Ian, without further ado, let me jump right into our discussion for today. So first topic is, let's talk about the different identification methods that our ancestors had developed through during the early days. Alam naman natin guys that establishing the identity of one person is really important because identification is very very useful in many aspects of our life, like for example marriage, business transaction, and many other events. No? So napakahalaga guys, no, that we could be able to establish our identity. Not only for, ang pinaka-major concern kasi when it comes to identity is of course with regards to the issues on money matters usually. No? For example, you wanted to have a bank transaction, no? Ikaw ay mangungutang or ikaw ay maglo-loan, magde-deposit, magwi-withdraw. Those really needs some way of establishing or verifying the identity of one person. However, because we are more on, how do we call this? No, yung pakikipagkalakal, and not only that, yung samahan, yung like for example clans, family affiliation, membership to a certain group or certain clans. Those needs to have a way for them to establish the identity of their members or of their loved ones. So what I'm pointing out here is that even during the early days, identification is really a serious matter. Napakahalaga that makes our ancestor come up with a way of identifying somebody. So we have here some of those early methods that they're using. First, of course, we have tattooing. Diba yung tattooing before is like, if you are a member of a certain tribe, they put some tattoo. They use tattoo to identify to what tribe do you belong, or even to what clan do you belong. No? So, while in fact tattooing could be a good way of establishing identity, but of course, with regards to whether or not it is reliable, whether or not it is doable, that's where the issue relies. Kasi, of course, we could fake tattoo. Like for example, I'm not really a member of that tribe, but I wanted to become one of them. So I could just like put a tattoo on myself similar to those tattoo that is recognizable to that tribe. Then they would look at me and look at my tattoo, and I will become part of them. Parang ganun. So madali siyang gayahin, And if you want to hide your identity, like for example, I'm departing na, lalayas na ako. Ayoko na sa tribe na ito, ayoko na sa clan na ito. Gusto ko nang umalis. So I could do some way to remove my tattoo or hide my tattoo so that if I go like in other places, they would not recognize me as a part of that tribe or a part of that clan, which could, cause conflict, di ba? Parang may tattoo kang ganyan, nakita ka ng kalaban yung tribe or clan. So, you could fall as a victim. No? You could be their target, no? Para pwede kang maging target. So, what you can do to protect yourself from that is to hide your identity. And how could you do that? By either, hiding your tattoo that is distinguishable to other groups. So there are many ways, of course, that we could hide the tattoo, like for example, tampering it, removing it, no, or damaging the tattoo to make it unrecognizable. So it's not really a good way of establishing identity, but it serves its purpose during the early days kasi hindi pa naman ganun ka-complex yung technology, no? We have also scarification. Usually it involves either mutilation, yun, or hindi naman kaya is inflicting injury to some part of your body that could, serve as your identity. Like for example, no, if you want to make a scar, no, dito sa mukha mo para makita na, oh, okay, I belong to this group, no, I belong to this type of family, or hindi naman kaya is to make me someone that is easily recognizable. Like for example, we have yung Harry Potter, no? Harry Potter has a scar on his nose, on his forehead, no? Yung lightning scar that gives them an idea who he is whenever they saw that. No? Hindi nila kilala si Harry Potter, but pag nakita nila yung scar niya, the scar ng lighting doon, ng kidlat doon sa kanyang noo, they could easily identify him as Harry Potter because that symbolizes something to their culture. No, parang ganun. So, you could use that as a means of establishing the identity. Like for example, I wanna be known as a person. So, gumawa ako ng, let's say, X mark dito. Parang samurai X, something like that, no? X mark dito. Then, those who knows me, no? And who will share my story, okay? They will, ipapakilala nila ako sa ibang tao. No? Makikilala ako based on my distinguished scars or mark on my face or in any part of my body. So, they could use that to identify me. Maybe they don't know me, di nila ako kilala, pero pag nakita nila yung scar, no, they could recognize me. However, no, same problem as we have with regards to tattooing. Syempre, pwede mong itago, pwede mong burahin, pwede mong ibahin, no, which could affect the accuracy when it comes to establishing the identity. No, pwedeng may ibang mangopya sa'yo sa identity mo, gagayahin lang nila yung remarkable, no, or yung significant scars or mark mo sa body, no, then they could already impersonate you, no? That's the sense with regards to scarification. And plus, it's definitely brutal. It's brutal. Okay? Portrait parlay, or the spoken picture before talks about the creation of an illustration of someone's face. No? So, lahat ng details, no, ng pagmumukha mo ay nakalagay sa record, nakalagay sa drawing. So, they are using that as a means of identification. But you know what's the problem here? Changes. No, changes. Our face usually suffers a lot of changes throughout our life. No? Like for example, you suffered injury. No? Or hindi naman kaya is sinadya mong baguhin yung mukha mo. Or even as we grow older, our facial characteristic change. No? So it's not a reliable one. No? It may be in, like for example, during the early years, no? Halimbawa is, ngayon, nagkaroon sila ng portrait mo. Nagkaroon sila ng portrait mo. Then they're parang yung wanted, no? They're looking for you using that portrait. If hindi pa naman ganun katagal yung space between when that drawing or when that sketch was made, no, to your to the current year or to the current day that they're looking for you using that. So pwedeng hindi pa ganoon ka-significant yung changes. They can still identify you, by your sketch, no? However, if that, like for example, 1 year, 2 years had passed already, then it could affect already. It could greatly affect the accuracy already of this, no? And for example, di ba? Portrait parlay is the very concept of the cartographic sketch, no? Yung ginagawa nila ngayon, no? For example, they don't have an image of the accused ng suspect, so they could make an image out from the description of the witness, no? They could create an image based on the description of the witness, and they could use that, no, to look or identify the suspect. Hanapin nila based on the sketch. So that's the concept. But you know naman that there's a problem with regards to that. There's a lot of problem with regards to that, especially that today we are so advanced already. But siguro before, okay pa, no? Usable pa siya. But as time goes by, no, its reliability as a means of identification is already declining. Same with photograph, no, or photography. So photography was already being used during the early days for establishing the identity. No? Hindi naman to lang para yung identification card that we have today, but more likely on photographs, then they try to look for that person based on the image printed, no, produced by the process of photography. However, as you all know, under the history of photography, during the early days, hindi siya practical, no? Mahirap makakuha ng photograph ng isang tao kasi hindi pa naman ganun kalat yung camera as an instrument or as a gadget, no? So mahirap kumuha ng photograph, plus no, the fact that the reliability of photograph as a way of identifying someone, no, really depends upon the quality of the photograph and also the angle taken. So for example, doon sa photograph niya, nakaharap siya, no? Pag nakalikod siya, hindi mo na siya makilala, or nakaside siya, hindi mo na siya makilala. Doon sa picture niya, sa photograph niya is mahaba yung buhok niya, nagpagupit siya, you could possibly not be able to identify that person already because something had changed into his physical characteristics, no? And we all know, pag photography naman, it's more reliant on physical characteristic of an individual, no? And some of our physical characteristic can actually be easily changed. So that's the problem, no? I think the most commendable, no, way of establishing identity during the early days was more on anthropometry, no? However, there are disadvantages of the concept of anthropometry. Well, anthropometry, guys, ito yung tinatawag natin Bertillonage, or the bone measurement or body measurement process, wherein your body measurement are being recorded, no, and this will be filed, no, maifa-file siya, itatago yan, just in case the need will arise. They will go back to these records and compare your body measurement to the body measurement that they have on file. So, for example, no, kasi usually ang kinukuhanan ng body measurement are those individuals who have already gone into prison. So nakulong ako halimbawa ngayon, no, parang it's part of the booking process that we have today. Diba yung booking process, kunin kang fingerprint, kunan ka ng mugshot, things like that, medical record and the like, no? So that noon, no, nagkaroon din sila ng concept of booking process through anthropometry, wherein no, your body measurement will be taken, no? Kunan nila yung body measurement, the length of your arms, the length of your leg, your shoulder, no, your head, the circumference of your head. All of these are being put into record. And also, I would like to point out that during this time, fingerprinting already exists, photography already exists, portrait parlay already exists. All of these are being combined together in order to make or to complete the file on anthropometry. Kasi taliwas sa ating karaniwang kaalaman na ang anthropometry is only concerned with bone measurement, not actually. Sabi ko nga, the concept of anthropometry was like the booking process that we have today, no? Wherein, pagpasok mo sa kulungan, kunin nila lahat ng record mo, your fingerprint, they will take a photo of you, they will take note of any scars or tattoo that is unique to you, no? Lahat yun i-record nila. plus with the portrait parlay. So anthropometry is like a system. It is actually a system that records all the relevant information about you, that they will keep that on record just in case the need for it will arise. Like for example, the William and Will West, wherein one of those two individuals went to prison, and then later on, no, may na-encounter silang isang tao, and they tried to verify his identity, no, and they relied on to the identity, I mean the file recorded through the anthropometric system. So they compared, it suits or it fits the record. Like for example, they have the same facial characteristic, para magkamukha sila. Bone measurement is also the same, but the problem is that they are I don't know guys if they are related or not, but most of the record says they are not related. They just happen to have the same facial features. They just happen to have the same bone measurement and so on. Parang they are identical twin in description, no, parang ganun. So one was a criminal and the other was not. They have the same bone measurement, but then it just proves, no, that merong loophole, may butas ang concept ng anthropometry. It does not apply to identical twins or to those individuals that have doubles, no. May instances kasi guys na even if you're not related to each other, magkamukha kayo, magkasing tangkad kayo, lahat ng facial features nyo halos magkaparehas, but you are not the same person, parang ganun, no? The concept of doppelganger. Okay, so with all of this ancient form of or ancient methods of identification, no, during their time they surely served their purposes, no, but then more and more problems are keep on arising that needed to be addressed, no, such as for example for identical twins, no, paano mo magamit, or how can we efficiently distinguish, no, or identify a person, no, who has, identical twins, no. So when we talk about anthropometry, hindi na siya applicable kasi nga of course they are identical to each other, then they would probably have the same bone measurement, body measurement, itsura, ganun din yun, and so on. So merong isang problema dito na kailangan nating lutasin, kaya nangangailangan pa tayo ng mas reliable way of establishing the identity of one person that gives birth now to the concept of fingerprint system. Okay? So fingerprint literally, or the prints on your hand, no? Actually, fingerprints are the prints left onto an object when you touch an object, because if you're going to look closer into your hands, no, into your fingers, you will see as ridges, you will see yung mga lines, no, something that parang lines diyan sa inyong mga kamay, no. Try looking at it in each of your every fingers. You will notice that there are lines there. Those are fingerprint ridges. Now, so when you touch an object, it will leave a mark because our hands usually produce some sweat, no, and that sweat are the medium that makes your prints, no, that makes your ridges transferable to objects that you touch, no? So ngayon, since we know what is a fingerprint, why do we claim that fingerprint is the most effective means of establishing the identity of one person? Why? No, it was found out, no, with the different studies that had been conducted, no, na-establish nila that fingerprint is very unique, no, not only to ourselves. Kasi if you're going to look closer, guys, pansinin mo, none of your fingers have the same fingerprint. None of your fingerprints have is the same to your parent, is the same to your brothers or sisters, or it's the same to any person. That's very unique features of yours. So it's very unique, no? Plus, in terms of identity, no, it's very simplistic, no? Simplistic ng concept ng fingerprint identification, wherein you're just going to compare two prints, no? Isang print, no, which may be the suspected prints, and the other print was the fingerprint coming from from the person suspected. No? So if you're going to compare them, side-by-side comparison, you will see some you would see some either dissimilarities or similarities between them, so you can conclude immediately. No? Practicality, guys, compared to other types of identification, no, during the early days, fingerprint is more practical kasi you don't need to draw to measure the, diba? Hindi mo na kailangan sukat-sukatan pa yung kanyang mga hindi mo na kailangan sukat-sukatan pa yung kanilang mga body measurement and the like, no, in order to come up with identity. No? You only need to compare his fingerprint to the fingerprint being suspected above. No? And infallibility, no? It's very infallible. As I've stated, not even, ito yung maganda dito kasi not even identical twins have the same fingerprint. So, the likelihood of one person having the same fingerprint is so close to none, no, that it is very infallible. No? So, that's the three major reasons why fingerprint as a means of identification is very effective. No? Of course, we don't have yet the concept of DNA dito, ano? Wala pa yung DNA. But even with the presence of DNA, no, with regards to accuracy, syempre mas accurate si DNA. But with regards to practicality and simplicity, I think we still go with fingerprint, no? Compared to DNA. But both of them have their own weaknesses and have their own strength. No? Nowadays, fingerprint is not only limited for establishing identity. It's also used for criminal investigation and even during the time of calamities, where we need to identify some persons that are already beyond recognition, beyond facial recognition, and so on. Yung hindi mo na makilala ang kanilang mukha, no? We can still be able to establish their identity as long as the hands and the prints are not totally damaged at all. No? So if it's totally damaged, then you can rely with the use of DNA. But for practicality reason, as long as visible pa yung kanyang prints, you can use fingerprints. Okay? Let's talk about the history of fingerprints. So we have here the different personalities that have contributed so far in the development of fingerprint as a method of establishing the identity. First, pasok yan si Thomas Bewick. Guys, I didn't included their specific contribution dito sa presentation ko, but surely you have that on your module. No? Mag-base na lang kayo doon sa module natin. So first we have Thomas Bewick, no, and Dr. Henry P. De Forest, no. They both contributed in a way that they are the first person. I don't know if the first person, because the concept of fingerprint, no, was already present even during the biblical time. Nandun na yan. May mga records tayo wherein some prints were found in clay tablet, mga ganun. So it's already present. The concept, the idea of fingerprint is no longer new, but maybe the idea of it as a means of establishing one's identity is very new. So we have Thomas Bewick and Henry P. De Forest, who started using their print, no, their thumbprint or fingerprint in sealing in sealing their documents, their works, no. So kumbaga, for example, I'm a painter, no, I paint something, and instead of writing my signature or my name on the painting, I'll just put my mark. So ganun yung parang ginagawa nila, no? So they have their own profession, may mga trabaho sila involved, and they are using their prints as a signature or as a mark, no, as a mark for their identity. So though they probably don't have yet the idea, no, on how fingerprint works, no, how fingerprint can be usable as a means of establishing identity, but they had already relied onto this, maybe believing or having a slight idea on its uniqueness and its usability. No? So we would like to give the credit to Thomas Bewick and Henry P. De Forest. Then, later on, nagkaroon na tayo ng scientific inquiry with regards to the concept of fingerprint little by little. So, we have there Dr. Nehemiah Grew, no? Where he wrote a research, no? Talking about the so-called philosophical transaction, no? Where, dito naman guys, it's a thesis where it discusses the presence of the so-called ridge, no? Yung mga lines dyan sa ating kamay, and pores, no? Doon sa ridge kasi may pores yan, yung nilalabasan ng ating pawis, no? So he pointed all these things out, no, in one of his work on fingerprint, but most likely focus on ridges and pores, no? Pero it's remarkable, sabi ko nga, that they are starting to have an interest already on the concept of fingerprinting. Although, not directly on the fingerprint and its usability, but rather, they are looking at it already as a possible interest in the field of science. No? So that was supported by Govard Bidlu, no? Who worked also on the ridges and pores, no? Where he also wrote, no, a thesis entitled Anatomia Humanis Corporis, no, where it supported the appearance and arrangement of ridges on thumb, no? Then he discusses that you can observe the characteristic of this features on the fingerprint by exaggerating. Kumbaga, palakihin mo siya, no? Then you can observe that they have distinguishing characteristic. So, little by little, sabi ko nga, nagpro-progress na yung concept ng fingerprint as a science, no? Because most or majority of people in the scientific community are showing interest onto the concept of fingerprinting, no? And then, we also have here Dr. Marcelo Malpighi or Malpighi in other references where he published his work. It is done in a book type, no? Yung tinatawag natin De Externo Tactus Organo, no, where he described that the ridges found on the palmar surface of the hand, which course is diverse design and the pores which serve as the mouth of the sweat gland. So again, now in relation to the work of Dr. Nehemiah Grew and Govard Bidlu, he also noted that the presence of the pores, no, and he even explained that these holes, no, that this opening into found onto our ridges are where the so-called the sweats, no, yung pawis, doon siya lumalabas. So one of contribution of Malpighi is more on his discovery in the layer of the skin, which he named the inner layer, diba, yung dermal papillae or dermis, and then we have the epidermis, which is the outer layer of the skin. So that is still in relation with regards to prints or ridges found onto the hand. No? Then we also have J.C.A. Mayer, no, where he published a book, no, which was considered the Atlas of Anatomical Illustration. It's the Atlas of Anatomical Illustration, no, of fingerprints, wherein, no, I don't know if this is positive, but then he believes that the arrangement of the skin, the arrangement of the skin in the ridges, I mean, the arrangement of the skin ridge are so unique, no, that it's not even duplicated even in our hands. Tignan nyo guys, no, tingin kayo sa daliri ninyo, try to observe, no, naulit ba yung fingerprint ninyo? Kumbaga parang may chance ba or may possibility ba, no, na yung fingerprint ng thumb ninyo is the same thing with your index finger, your middle finger, your ring finger, or your little finger. So J.C.A. Mayer noted that it is very unique, that it's not even duplicated in one in the fingers of one person only. But of course, no, what makes it only look like the same is that yung general characteristic niya. Kumbaga, if you're going to look at it, pwede silang mukhang magkaparehas. But if you're going closer, if you're going to observe it closely, no, And if you're going to focus more on the individual characteristic, you will see that they're actually very different. So that's with regards to JCA Mayer. No? Hermann Weckler. Ito, I think it's very interesting. Mr. Hermann Weckler, no, actually made an experiment of himself where he printed, no, yung palm print niya in a certain document to observe, to prove whether there is really a change that is occurring into our fingerprint or into our ridges. So he did this in year 1856 and did it again in year 1897. So that's more like 40 years had passed, no? Where I think 41 years later, no, nagprint siya ulit. 'Di ba sabi natin 1856 print niya na yung kanyang palm print into certain document, and after 41 years inulit niya ulit. Then he compared and he noted, no? He noted that, you know, fingerprints are permanent. It doesn't change. Even how many years will pass, it will remain the same. So that's one of the important principle that we have that supports the usability of fingerprint as an evidence, no? That's the principle of the so-called permanency. No? It's very permanent, no? Na kahit tumanda ka, no, ganun pa rin yung fingerprint mo. Okay? That's the credit should be given to Hermann Welker. Hermann Welker. Okay? Then we also have here Professor Johannes E. Perkinji, no? His contribution was on coming up with the 9 classification of fingerprint patterns that we know today, no? Nagkaroon tayo ng 9 classification of fingerprint patterns, such as, to name a few, we have, for example, we have plain arc, no? We have tented arc, we have loop, ulnar, and radial, and many others. So not necessarily in that, ano, kasi iyan na yung innovative. Dati ang sabi niyo diyan, the traverse curve, no? Which is more like is pertaining to the plain arc, no, and other things, no? So the 9 classification, and still we are using that today in the modern world, no? We're still using the classification made by Johannes Perkinji. So that's what that's his contribution, no? It was from Germany. No? Then we also have here Sir William Herschel. Well, Sir William Herschel most likely applied the concept of fingerprint. No? Though we have already here yung pinag-usapan natin kanina, yung mga nauna, Henry D. Forrest and Thomas Bewick, they're using the fingerprint already as a way of, you know, signature. Parang ganun, ginagamit nilang parang signature yung fingerprint dati. No? But then, here comes Sir William Herschel, no? After the development onto the idea, after the development on the concept of fingerprint and its usability, he started applying such and used that in his field of work. So, Sir William Herschel before was in charge of subdividing the British among Indians. So, kumbaga is siya yung civil registry, no? During that time na kung saan is he is requiring those individuals to come to his office and fill up some papers and so on to identify kung sino sa kanilang British, sino sa kanilang Indians, and so on. So now, aside from the usual data being collected, di ba, yung pangalan, apelyido, things like that, no? He also included the print, yung palm print. He required the addition of palm print to the document to prevent impersonation. We are not really sure here if Sir William Herschel knows already the concept of identification through the use of fingerprint, but surely, no, meron na siyang idea, no, that the inclusion of the palm print, no, could prevent impersonation, no, could prevent the duplication of the record. So yun yung ginawa niya, no? He basically applied, no? He made a way to use the concept of fingerprinting or palm printing to the physical world. Nagbigay siya ng meaning, kumbaga. Nagbigay siya ng purpose for this science, no? Nagbigay siya ng use case, no? For palm print and fingerprinting. So that's what he contributed. Then we have here also Dr. Henry Folds. This is very remarkable kasi usually or during the early days when they discovered the concept of fingerprinting, they only used that for personal identification, for record purposes only. Ngayon, Henry Folds, Dr. Henry Folds, made mention of the so-called chance print. No? Yung chance print na yun, or the prints na naiiwan ng isang tao kapag humahawak siya ng objects. No? For example, I touch this object. I touch this object. Now, since I touch it, meron ng print na naiwan dyan. And if this will be a significant evidence to a case, no, then they could probably actually look, no, pwede silang makakita ng print dito, fingerprint dito, through processing, at lilitaw doon yung aking fingerprint. And he made mention, yun nga, sabi natin yung chance print, and the possibility of this to be used for criminal investigation. So that's what he contributed, ano? Of course, no, it flourished, no, kasi kung titignan mo ngayon, talagang ito naman yung nagiging purpose na ng fingerprinting for criminal identification. Let's say, for example, no, they wanted to identify who is the person who committed the crime, no, who the person who barred into the house, no, sino yung forcibly pumasok sa isang lugar, walang permission. They could search for fingerprint left onto the crime scene or yung tinatawag natin chance print. So, pwede nilang ma-identify kung sino yung pumasok, no, sino yung tao nandun, no, sa crime scene, etc., etc. So, Henry Folds, that's his contribution. I think it's very remarkable, napakahalaga kasi that's what the fingerprint system is used now, no? Mas yun ang pinagagamitan ng fingerprint ngayon. Then we also have Sir Francis Galton, no? One of the prominent scientists during the time, no? So he classified fingerprint, no, from the doon sa naunang classification ni Dr. Perkinji, no? Nagkaroon din siya ng classification which he divided the different fingerprint patterns into 3 basic fingerprint family. Then we're talking about the 3 family of fingerprint. Such as the arc, loop, and word. No? So that's what Sir Francis Galton contributed to the field of fingerprinting. Lastly, and most importantly, we have Sir Edward Richard Henry. No? His contribution is very remarkable that made him was so remarkable that made him known as the father of fingerprint. No? He was known as the father of fingerprint science because of his contribution. Ano ba yung kinontribute niya? Well, let's make an analogy. Okay? So, we have the idea of Henry Folds, no, where chance print on the crime scene could be used to identify the person who entered or who was present onto the crime scene when it was committed. So, yun. Ngayon, in every individual, we usually have 5 fingers. No? I call this fingers, somebody called it thumbs, pero let's just consider it as finger for now. No? So, finger, we have 10 fingers. Ngayon, meron kang isang chance print, suspected print, no, doon sa crime scene. Of course, kung makita mo yan sa crime scene, hindi mo naman masasabi agad that fingerprint comes from the index finger of the left hand or index finger of the right hand and so on. So, you are going to search for it through comparing the different prints present on the file. Di parang ganon. Okay? Problema, no? The only way for them to come up with identification with the use of fingerprint is when meron silang suspected prints and we have a prints available from the person being suspected. Parang, di ba? Yung fingerprint nakita nila sa crime scene, tapos ako yung pinagsususpetsahan nilang nag-commit ng crime. So, all they need to do is to get my prints and compare that to the prints, no, na nandoon nakita sa crime scene. Okay? With that, madali lang kasi they only have, let's say, 10 fingers, no, na ikukumpara. So that prints found at the crime scene, they're going to compare that to my thumb print, to my index print, no, to my middle, to my ring finger, to my little finger, and then doon sa kabila kong kamay. Okay? So napakadali, no? Napakadali ng konsepto niya. The problem here is that, no, what if you don't have any suspect? Wala kang suspect. So, let's say you are living in a place where there are about 5,000 individuals, no? At lahat ng 5,000 individuals nito ay nakuhanan nyo na ng fingerprint. Okay? So, meron na kayong file, meron na kayong record ng mga fingerprint ng 5,000 kataong nakatira dyan sa isang lugar. Okay? Then you have one suspected fingerprint allegedly coming from the perpetrator. So you wanted to identify who among this community, no, who among these people here that residing here, no, owns that fingerprint. So you see the problem? Nakikita nyo yung problema natin dito? No? How can they be able to do that? All they can do is that get the print from the crime scene and open the file of this 5,000 individual one by one. Okay? So ganun ang gagawin nila. So for example, no, since lahat naman kukunin, so ibig sabihin, isang print, ikukumpara nila, okay, file ni Mr. A, compare that to thumb, compare that to index, no, compare that to middle finger, compare that to ring finger, and the like. Okay, so you, for example, mag-isang mo lang gumagawa niyan. So, pinakamabilis na sa'yo is you can compare the print, the suspected print that you have to 10 person every day. Kaya mo, yun na yung pinakakaya mo, no? Yun na yung pinaka maximum kumbaga na kaya mong gawin in one day. 10 fingerprint record or 10 individuals, yun yung kaya mong i-compare. So if you're going to compute like 10 individuals to 5,000 individuals, how many is that? Ilan yan? That's around 500, right? 500. So that means you need 500 days to scan all the files on record, no? To see if one of those records actually match with the print you have on the crime scene. So 500 days, how many? 1 year and 3 months almost, no? For 5,000 individuals only. The problem is that paano kung more than that pa, mas marami pa. So it's very time consuming. The concept of fingerprint comparison to determine the identity of one person is very time consuming. Ngayon, why I stated that Sir Richard Henry's contribution was actually very important to the field of fingerprint identification. It's because he was the person who solved the problem I mentioned. Diba sabi ko time consuming siya? So that's when Sir Edward Richard Henry comes in and introduce yung classification system na ginawa niya. No? So he devised a template on how to file, no, paano mo iayos yung record para nang sa ganon, if you want to know, no, if you want to search whether that print, no, found onto the crime scene was actually on record, you could do it without consuming much of time, no? So yun yung kanyang dinevelop, guys, yung efficient fingerprint filing system, kung paano mo iaayos, no, yung record ng fingerprint file para nang sa ganon, para ka lang nag-i-scan sa pages ng libro to find out whether merong ka-match yung fingerprint na nakita mo sa crime scene doon sa record nyo on file. Like, parang yung CSI pero manual, di ba? Pag CSI, you're going to put the fingerprint, then mag-i-scan sa computer, then after a minute or an hour, papakita niya na kung ilang matches yung nakita niya, then you will have the identity of those person who matched the fingerprint already. Parang ganun. Pero manual, no? Pero manual siya ginagawa. But still, compared to the first illustration that we have before, no? Nung una, na kung saan you need at least 1 year and 3 months to scan 500 individuals fingerprint file, no? That would be much more doable, no? Napakaganda ng progress na ito for fingerprint. Okay? So that's why he deserved to be called as the father of fingerprint science by developing that. Okay? Ayun guys, so yun muna sa ngayon, no? Some of the topic will be further discussed in the discussions to come, in the sessions to come, to have a better idea with regards to the topic on personal identification. No? So that's it for the introduction of the subject matter. I do hope you were able to pick up some knowledge with regards to the lecture that we have. No? That's it for today. See you on the next discussion. Bye-bye.